Thank you, Rita. So the expectation from the 11th of September committee was that my team were to go away and investigate the optimum configuration of the new proposed civic space in the Lower Queen Street area. The direction, as I interpreted it, was to consider that from a perspective of design performance rather than any sort of commercial sort of imperative around the overall proposal. My team have undertaken that work, identifying a series of configurations of that space, and then have applied a series of criteria to those configurations. The criteria that we've selected is born out of international best practice when it comes to evaluating public space. Spatial proportions, edge quality, physical connectivity, views and permeability and safety. And each of those configurations was assessed against those broad criteria. Understanding the sensitivity of this particular project, we sought to have that work peer reviewed by Gale Architects, and they confirmed that the methodology we had applied and also the final conclusion was both valid and supported or supportable. If I can quickly Rita, do I need to? I can do that. Great. If I just quickly reorientate people around the project, so hopefully that's reasonably legible to most. Members will recall that the public space that will be re-provided in the Lower Queen Street area is to a large extent defined on its eastern edge, its northern edge and its southern edge, i.e. to the east we have the CPO building, to the north we have Tyler Street, and that is still required for bus movement in a northerly direction, and to the south we have Galway Street, which equally is required from a public transport perspective going forward. So those edges are essentially defined. What was in question was the extent of the western boundary, which by yes.
Also, please.
Oh, apologies. Yeah. What was in question was the western boundary, which by default also starts to define the extent of land to be sold or leased as part of the overall proposal. As I say, we applied that criteria to a number of configurations, and there are multiple configurations. The variables are quite considerable. So there was a first sift of what those options should be. Sorry, I'm flicking through some precedents that were used as part of the study. Trying to get to the options. Here we are. So the boundary options, we identified 5 key options, and fundamentally they're based off 2, I guess, key reference points, one being Zurich House, 21 Queen Street, and the other being HSBC Tower, 1 Queen Street. So all of the options either consider a building line along that western edge that runs from Zurich House or runs from HSBC. So option 1, consider, sorry, I should have put my lenses in, I'm struggling to actually see that. Option 1 considers a boundary off Zurich House. Option 2 considers a boundary off HSBC. Option 3, across, there we go. I don't know if I can I move, Rita, can you move that up so that you can see both options? I should explain that for each of the options we considered the amenity yard either retained as open space or developed upon, and that was a direction from the committee also, that we considered the amenity yard that exists in front of 1 Queen Street. That amenity yard through the district plan means that area can't be built on as of right. Option 3 considered a Zurich House boundary line, but with an indent. Option 4, it's kind of a diagonal boundary running from essentially the Zurich House building line to the HSBC building line, and the fifth version an indented space, I suppose. Again, a slightly different configuration. And as I said, there are multiple other configurations, but these were seen to be the most realistic. Through the assessment of each of those against the criteria, and this is what that assessment looks like, you know, a scoring matrix essentially against that criteria, we arrived at what we believe to be the preferred option. Probably worth mentioning that criteria includes both qualitative and quantitative assessments. So spatial proportions, for example, there's a degree of metric around that. So, for example, we know that as a rule of thumb, 35 metres is the extent to which a person can recognise another person, and that starts to determine how they use that space. And there's, you know, a body of work, research around that particular matter that extends over 4 decades. So at 35 metres, people tend to then hug the edges of a space rather than actually walk through a space, and it fundamentally changes people's behaviours. There's also issues around, I suppose, the proportionality of the space as well relative to its buildings. So a ratio of 1 to 2 is accepted as a good proportion for public space, i.e. the width of the space relative to the height of the buildings around it. So those metrics were folded into the evaluation. As I said, option 1 was indicated through this work to be the preferred option, and that's the one that is currently being pursued. I'll just try and jump to that. It's some 50 pages or so long.
Plenty of time.
So that's it by way of an explanation. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, so we'll just take a couple of quick questions. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I'll just go back to my earlier question, and that was around the new information that's coming to light, especially around light rail. And I'm assuming that light rail goes up Queen Street, effectively provides a link through to Wynyard and the like, in which case it will be used, I would think, to a huge extent because of the additional retail and other activities in that area. Given that circumstance, that you're going to have light rail effectively going up the corridor, and there's a need to accommodate massive pedestrian movements in that area, and it's accepted, I think, that we are going to have some public space there, and I'm assuming that's a space where people can sit and they can admire the magnificent facade of the old post office building and the like, and taking into account your 35-metre recognition and no doubt other things. How does that put us around elimination of QE2 Square as it is now, and all of the things that it provides and could provide into the future?
Madam Chair, perhaps I could answer the more general question around the activities within the space, and Rick Walden can perhaps deal with the issue of LRT.
Remembering that we've, you know, this is discussing where the line has been set, and
That's
we've
right.
had probably 4 or 5 meetings on the degree of detail.
Great. Okay, so the use of the space is critical, of course, and we have, as part of this study and now ongoing reference design work that's been undertaken by my team, considered the footfall that will occur within the space, and as Councillor Walker is quite correct, there'll be lots of people using the space in lots of ways. Actually, we see that as a recipe for success and something that needs to be welcomed. They are opportunities rather than issues. We do need to, as part of this work, consider through an assessment around through-in levels, which essentially measures the density of people in a space and considers comfort levels and safety and security. We need to make sure that the space works from that perspective. All of that's been factored in. There is a modelling process underway at the moment. So we're aware that this will be a busy place, and actually that's one of the real opportunities from the space. In terms of seating, it's yet to be determined how much seating there is. Actually, this is a civic space that needs to be relatively clean, needs to be capable of accommodating a number of large-scale events and activities, so it needs to be flexible in nature, and placement of furniture, street furniture, can often challenge that, so we need to be really quite careful about that as a component. There is an intention that there is an activity edge to both or one side, at least one side of the public space, so you can expect there to be programmed activity, be it outdoor dining or events or buskers or whatever it might be. So all of those components have been folded into the project.
How about light rail though? I mean, that's the new thing that's in the mix. It's going to be going up Queen Street.
Yeah.
So how do we get on in
Rick,
terms of
I've got
public
you,
space?
Councillor Lee.
Madam Chair, look, there is work being done to evaluate what light rail might provide by way of a solution for the city in terms of its public transport requirements. At this point, there are a number of considerations of alignment and other such factors that would relate to that, to light rail. The team that are evaluating that, we as the City Centre Integration Team have constant contact and communication with them with respect to the developing of those options. They are very conscious of the lower Queen Street space, and any outcome that ultimately flows out of their work would take consideration of the requirements for lower Queen Street. But at this point there are no decisions that have been made with respect to alignment or other factors with respect to LRT. It's a work in progress.
Okay.
Still not really
Councillor-
getting an answer to my question.
No, Councillor, we can, I mean, we could fill hours on this discussion. The reality is this is the recommended line.
Well, it's pretty
And
important.
we also need to understand that this is an exceedingly full report, and let's not remember that we've worked with people like Young Gale, who you yourself have certainly spent time with and endorsed. And do you have any more questions?
Well, effectively, I haven't had an answer to the last question. We don't know. We don't know where the light rail's going. Well, I'd suggest it's going to be going up the middle of Queen Street. It's not going to go one side or the other. So we know where that's going. I can second guess that. So how does that impact on the QE2 square space and all of the issues around where people
we
sit
hear you. We
and
understand
they
the
walk?
question. I'm just
And
going to
I
ask
don't think
Tim.
we're going to have enough
Okay.
space if we
Hang
flog
on,
off
just
QE2
breathe
square.
for a second, Tim.
Through you, Madam Chair, this is a potential component of what might ultimately end up in Lower Queen Street. It's relatively fresh to us as a design team. However, we inevitably in the last week or so have been turning our mind to it. We've looked to international precedent in terms of what might occur and how those spaces are used, and took comfort from the fact that actually there are multiple examples internationally of such spaces that actually probably to a degree benefit from that active movement through the space. One particular project that we have looked at, Place de la Comédie in Bordeaux, is almost of the same configuration, same site of use. To our own. I've actually have a comparative study, just a two-page A3, which I can circulate now, which just illustrates that as a comparator. So a tram line creates a few design challenges for certain. However, they can certainly be overcome, and everything that we've seen internationally suggests that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I could just
Yep.
highlight though that the decision as to alignment hasn't yet been made.
Yep.
Nor has any decision.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for addressing the light rail question. It was on my list. Just in terms of the options, there are 10 options. I know you can't go over all of them, but 1A and 1B, you've recommended 1, but there's actually a 1A and a 1B. Why have you recommended option 1 and not 1A or 1B? Because there's a big difference there, Tim, and you well know it.
Yep.
1B assumes development over the public amenity yard.
Yeah.
Are
So,
you recommending 1A or 1B?
I'm recommending option one because the focus of the study is actually the configuration of the space. The resolution didn't require us to form a view on the future of the amenity yard, which is privately owned. However, I would say that currently there's no expressed intention from Precinct to develop that site, so it's something of a non-issue and, as I said, not subject to the optioneering that we've been through.
The resolution, Tim, actually said, and have due regard to the district plan amenity yard provisions in front of 1 Queen Street. So it was quite specific in directing you to definitely have a viewpoint on the amenity yard.
So the viewpoint on the amenity yard is actually, the council's position is expressed through the district plan, which is it can't be built on as of right. And that remains the case. I mean, I don't think we need to be needing to express that through the work we've done.
Though there are concepts from Precinct, are there not, which have shown, may not now, show development over the amenity yard.
But we still have, you know, we're not giving up all rights to have controls over how this unfolds.
Well, look, and the other question is, in terms of option 4, which is an eastern boundary with alignment with HSBC, that option only scores 1 negative score out of about 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 scores. It has 1 negative score and quite a few neutrals, and it seems to fail, but only because of those neutrals, which don't seem to align with the text in your report. So I'm looking at option 4. Again, the councillors can't see it because they don't have the full presentation.
It makes that pretty difficult for the
Yep,
rest of
it
the
does.
council sitting around this table here.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can we have this
can
in the
we
next
adjourn this
meeting?
matter
That's
and-
exactly,
and
councillor Wood, and I didn't quite hear the last bit, because that's exactly what Dr Blakely and I were saying. I think we've moved very quickly to thinking that this is a done deal. This is exactly what I explained at the beginning of the meeting. The report that comes back to us, hopefully next month, Dr Blakely's just going to check with the staff to see if it can be done. That's where, A, we talk about where the negotiations have got to, and B, we talk about the lines. So, you know, I think we just need to remember that we're not signing anything off today.
But the development agreement we've heard is likely to be signed off.
I know, Dr Blakely, can you just explain what you've explained to me?
Well, so the development agreement will be as Clive's explained it, but that does not preclude the sort of options that we're talking about. So you will get a full presentation next time about what has come out of that negotiation process on your behalf. But I think that the point that Rick Walden's making, and the other issue around the alignment of the light rail, is that subject to a considerable evaluation process, and we don't know. I don't think Rick can probably even tell us exactly when that might be resolved.
So will we have a say when this
Just
comes back?
hang on. Tim, do you want to just comment on that, or Rick?
Madam Chair, could I just make the point that was covered earlier, and that is that the development agreement is likely to be concluded in the next short period of time, certainly before the next meeting. And my understanding, Clive, correct me if I'm wrong, is that that may not be a negotiable point beyond that
Okay.
conclusion.
We're getting
So
a
we
little
don't
bit
have a
of,
say.
we're getting a little bit of mixed information here. Sorry, Roger, that's not the advice that I'd had, but in the light of what Clive told us earlier on, it seems that that decision has already been made.
Well, Chair, so all the negotiations with Precinct around the value of the land, and I suppose ACBL was very mindful of previous council decision and the desire to maximise the receipts from the land so that you had the most opportunity to re-establish that value elsewhere to create other space. So all the negotiations have been around, on the advice from Tim's team, around the area that he's now recommending.
Yep.
If there was a decision to go with a different area, we have to go back and renegotiate a different area. But everything was progressing to, and you would then take out less money in order to replace the space somewhere else. So you're really valuing that extra piece of space here more than you could do with that value elsewhere. So it's so important to keep that extra width that you trade that for the chance of taking that value and putting it in, as Tim was suggesting earlier, close to the waterfront. So it becomes a very important value choice for the council as to whether you want a wider pavement here or you want to take that with the other value and take it towards the waterfront.
Wider pavement.
So the critical issue is, whilst the process is underway and the line is being negotiated, the issue of light rail, Tim, your best practice advice to us as an expert practitioner in this field is that the light rail option, whenever it is and whenever it comes to fruition, can be incorporated in your preferred option.
That's correct. So the work that I'm presenting today didn't have the opportunity to consider that as a component. However, work that we've done over the course of the last couple of weeks suggests that its impact is relatively benign in terms of what we're seeking to achieve.
Exactly right.
How many minutes?
Councillor Lee.
Madam Chair, forgive me for going back on this one, but I hadn't read the New Zealand Herald this morning. I heard the explanation to Councillor Darby's concerns from Ms. Pirrett, but I had a look at the Herald article and I'm very puzzled. I heard Ms. Pirrett say that the consent was for a controlled activity under the Regional Coastal Plan for wharf repairs and maintenance. I'm sure I heard that, and yet I read in the Herald we're talking about wharf extensions 100 metres long or 130 metres long.
Councillor, I'm sure
Madam Chair.
Could we have...
I am not going to.
Well, what
return
I'm
to
concerned,
that.
no, I want an answer because
And
I
you've
hear there is a
had-
commissioner involved,
Councillor,
and
you
if it's a
had-
controlled activity, there's no need for any commissioner, so something doesn't add up here.
Councillor,
And
you
I have
had-
to say, I protest that the members of this council are not being advised of such a major development.
Councillor, you had a very full explanation from Ms. Pirrett. Ms. Pirrett, is there anything you wish to add?
It doesn't...
So, through the chair, what I explained, it was application to extend an existing structure, which is a controlled activity in the regional coastal policy statement. At the same time, it also was an application to do a discharge to stormwater, which does require a resource dent as a restricted discretionary activity. Because it is both of those are resource consents, we have to have a determination of whether or not they've been, the stormwater application was notified, and secondly, whether the controlled activity was stormwater consented to, and so they went to a duty commissioner, which is standard practice to enable the ongoing operation of ports, because in the regional coastal policy statement, these activities are deemed to be minor, and that is why the extension to wharf structures is a controlled activity.
I think that is a real misinterpretation of a minor activity under the
Councillor,
coastal plan
Madam
to
Chair.
extend by 100 metres into the harbour.
Councillor,
Have you talked to the yachting
Councillor,
fraternity about this?
Councillor Lee, I will not have the staff treated in that manner. That is completely inappropriate, and I'm chairing the meeting, so I don't want to hear from you now. We've been given a very
I have made a
clear
statement. I've made no
explanation
comment about the
from-
staff, Madam Chair.
You certainly have.
No, I
We've
haven't.
been given a very full
Madam
explanation.
Chair, I grew up in a country where public officials were accountable.
Councillor,
Maybe you
most of us,
haven't.
most of us actually understand the kind of planning process that Ms. Pirrett explained. It was signed off under the Auckland Regional Council, of which you were a chair. I would have thought that you would be very clear on the process that
I'm sorry, that is not a minor activity. A
duly-
100-metre
been
extension
duly
into the
followed.
harbour
So,
is not a minor
Councillor-
activity under any council.
Councillor, this is quite enough. I think we're going round and round in circles here, and I don't think it actually is in our interest. So, to move this on, we're just going to get a little bit of clarity back into the process. We're, I think, trying to edge our way forward to working out where we're at in the process. We've had the explanation of the line of potential sale for this area. We understand that the negotiations are currently underway on this. I'm actually going to suggest, because it's been a long morning so far, and it's now 2:16, at 2:15, lunch was going to be ready. I'm going to suggest that we take a lunch break at this stage. We've got the opportunity to do two things, to receive a little bit of, give people just a chance to calm down. Secondly, to get a bit of clarity on the process that we're in as far as negotiations on this line go, whether we do or don't have a decision that comes back to us, and I'm going to adjourn us until 1 o'clock.
Madam Chair, can I just have a clarification? So we're not going to just move to receive this report?
We're going to move to adjourn until 1 o'clock, and I'm going to move that if someone will second that.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. But we'll come back to it, Councillor Fletcher. Nothing's going to change.
Madam Chair, it's just in the interests of Councillor Lee, and while I know that he is probably somewhat heated, I think that there's an important point here
We can
with
discuss
regards
that over
governance.
lunch, I think, Councillor. I move that we be adjourned. Is there a seconder
Yes.
for that? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you.